begin Chapter 10. We're going to look at review midpoint and distance formulas. You've covered these in previous math classes, but we'll start with the midpoint. And if you recall from geometry, the midpoint is just between 2 points. If I had point A and point B, the midpoint is the point in the middle to where these two parts are equal to each other. That's what the midpoint is. So let's say these were given on a plane as 2 points. This is x1, y1, and this is x2, y2. To find the coordinates of that middle point, right there, what we would do is find the average of the x's and the average of the y's. And just so on simple, the midpoint of 2 points is given by the average of the x's and the average of the y's. That's the thinking way of doing it. There's a formula for it, and we'll look at the formula here in just a minute. To find the average of two numbers, you add them together and divide by 2. And so what that gives us then is our formula, midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So you can think of it either way here. Some people like formulas. People tend to forget formulas, so that's why I like it thinking of it this way. It's the middle, so it's just the average. And so if I gave you that we had 2 points, A was the point 3, 6, and B was the point 7, -4. And I want to find the midpoint. So the midpoint is going to equal the average of the x's, 3 plus 7 divided by 2, the average of the y's, 6 plus -4 divided by 2. And if you work that out, 3 plus 7 is 10, 10 divided by 2 is 5, 6 plus -4 is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the midpoint is the point 5, 1. Okay? Now sometimes we know an endpoint. One of the endpoints, let's say, was the point 6, 3, and the midpoint is the point 2, -1, let's say. And we want to know what's the other endpoint. We don't know what the other endpoint is. What we're going to do is use this idea of the midpoint right here. So this value right here is the average of 6 and x1. So I can say that 2 is equal to 6 plus x1 divided by 2. And I can say that -1 is the average of 3 and y1. 3 plus y1 divided by 2. And so you just take the value from the midpoint and set it equal to the average of that point, that part of the point, the x value or the y value, whichever one you're dealing with. Now it's a matter of just solving these two little things for x1 and y1. Multiply by 2, I get that 4 equals 6 plus x1, so x1 equals -2. Multiply by 2, I get -2 equals 3 plus y1. y1 then is -3, -5. So my other endpoint is the point -2, -5. And that's how you find a missing endpoint. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the distance formula. And so again, if you went back up to the example I gave before, there's A, there's B, and I want to know what this distance is. x1, y1, x2, y2. We want to know what that length is. So there's a formula, we'll get to it in just a minute, but it really comes from this. I'm just going to create a right triangle. There's the change in the x's and the change in the y. And so the change in the x is just one of these minus the other one. It really doesn't matter which one because we're going to square it using the Pythagorean theorem. So I'm just going to go, this length right here is x2 minus x1. This length over here is the change in y, y2 minus y1. So this length is the change in x, this is the change in y. And you just subtract to find that difference. Okay? D then, D's Pythagorean theorem says this squared plus this squared equals that squared. So d squared is equal to x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So d then would be the square root of that, plus y2 minus y1 squared. That's the distance formula right there. Given 2 points x1, y1, x2, y2. So let's look at an example. So if I gave you that A was the point, I'll just use the point that I did before, 3, 6, and B was the point 7, negative 4. I want to find the distance between those 2 points. So the distance is given by this equation. So it's just x, so I'm going to label it x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to go x2 minus x1. So we're going to go square root of 7 minus 3 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. 7 minus 3 is 4. Negative 4, negative 6 is negative 10. 4 squared is 16. Negative 10 squared is 100. So this is the square root of 116. Okay? Does it matter which way I make x1, y1? So if I switch this around and made it be 3 minus 7 instead of 7 minus 3. Well, 3 minus 7 is negative 4, but when I square it, it ends up 16 anyway. So it doesn't make any difference. Just make sure that if I go this point minus this one for x, that I go the same direction, this one minus this one for y, and don't switch it around. Okay? Also be really careful with this negative sign. If I were going 6 minus negative 4, just make sure you be careful of that. All right, that's your assignment for today then.